Digital is a new space.
In a global world, things are changing. So if you don't keep yourself updated, you may not do the right thing.
The digital space is a great space in fostering innovation.
Providing access, internet access to the underserved, particularly educational institutions and healthcare facilities.
This is actually changing the whole spectrum of TVET.
Very easy in these institutions.
Youth within the community were impressed with the ICT and the internet connection. The Polytechnic even grew in high number of enrollment, right from 286 to 636.
Availability of internet has helped me more things like networking, seeking job online, communication, advertisement. It has now opened me millions of opportunities.
And so I think that collaboration is very fruitful. It is needed.
So this session aims to explore strategies for promoting meaningful connectivity and digital inclusion in Kenya, especially for marginalized and underserved communities, by overcoming access and affordability barriers, expanding digital literacy and skills to ensure that no one is left behind. I will be your moderator, wearing my hat on behalf of the Association of Community Networks in Kenya. And to take us through this interesting discussion is an esteemed panel composed of Dr. Fiona Asonga, the CEO of Technology Service Providers of Kenya. I will give her 1 minute to introduce herself in a befitting manner. We also have Bob Ochieng from the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. He's a Senior Director, New Generic Top-Level Domain Program. He'll tell us what that acronym means. We have Mr. Charles Juma from Digital Access Program, UKAID, and Mr. Adam Len from Huawei, who is not a stranger to these conversations. So it's really a rich panel just based on the experiences and the work that they are doing. So without further ado, I'll give each of the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, starting with Fiona. Fiona could be leaving us within the hour. She's a busy person, so if that opportunity comes, please bear with her, but I'll give her the first opportunity, then we will have the rest of the panelists introducing themselves. Karibu, Fiona.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Barrack, for the introduction you've done. I'll not add much to it. Basically, TESPOK is the industry association for technology service providers, and we manage the internet exchange point and the internet traffic for Kenya. We have been able to, I think that our participation on this panel is to be able to share insights on what we see in terms of connectivity and how that can be improved, the content that we have at the exchange point and all. And so we hope that we can have a fruitful conversation, and I can be able to share with you before I run for my next engagement with a county governor on a county that is very critical for this country in terms of connectivity and ensuring that we are able to have the submarine cables landing and serving them appropriately. So I found myself in a situation where the meetings were very close. So you'll bear with me if I have to run and go for my meeting with Mombasa County this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Bob?
Thank you very much, Barrack. Really glad to be part of this panel today. So I work for ICANN, as Barrack has already highlighted. I would say that ICANN does, or ICANN mostly plays in the background. And most of the time, probably until whatever we do maybe stops working or breaks down, if that doesn't happen, we might not actually be known. You know, it's like electricity. We'll only realize it when there's a blackout, isn't it? So probably part of this panel, we highlight the position of unique identifiers and how they contribute to this overall discussion on connectivity, and why unique identifiers are not only a technical resource, but also an important economic resource.
Thank you, Bob. Adam, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Lane. I work at Huawei here in Kenya, and I'm in charge of policy and partnerships. And I think for those of you who don't know, Huawei, our primary business is around infrastructure for the telecommunications world, as well as businesses and governments who are digitizing. But we also have a big Huawei cloud business. We also have a solar power business, and we also have the consumer device business as well. We've been in Kenya now about 25 years. I think play quite a big role, and we're very pleased to share our ideas here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Thank you, Barrack. I think we were with you in the morning, but for this panel, my name is Charles Juma. I lead the Digital Access Program of the UK government, and then I'm based at the British High Commission in Nairobi at Upper Hill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this panel is largely focused on community networks, which are loosely defined as telecommunication infrastructure that is designed and deployed by the community for the benefit of the community. Listening to conversations in the morning, specifically when I listened to the Safaricom representative, he mentioned that the country has about 100% coverage of 2G. He mentioned that for 3G and 4G, I think it is over 70%. In fact, 4G, he mentioned 98%, if I got my notes right. And for 5G, he talked of 13%. And I remember Charles asking a question that the maths doesn't seem to be mathing there. We've seen a lot of interventions, including programs led by governments like KDIP. And to speak, each and every speaker on this panel is actually doing something to try and close this gap. So the first question that I will raise, which is addressed to all the speakers, is what combination of strategies, tools, and policies are being deployed by your organization to address barriers to meaningful connectivity in underserved and marginalized areas. And we'll kick off with Fiona.
We are doing to try and address the barriers to connectivity is ensuring that we can have as much, in terms of content, as much content as possible within the country. So TESPOK has a strategy of making sure that content distribution networks, content management networks, the likes of Meta and Facebook, are able to bring their content into KXP, the likes of TikTok and all. So we still have that right at the top of our radar, because that then makes it easier for Kenyans who are accessing this content to access it faster. It reduces the speeds of connectivity, of access, because the latency is faster. You're able to get content within 5 to 20 milliseconds of what is hosted in Kenya, and it takes over 100 milliseconds of what is not here and probably in Europe. And if it is sitting within the Asian Pacific region, then it might probably take longer if it's not hosted nearer to us, like in Europe. And then we also have making sure that we can have as many service providers as possible connecting to the exchange point, because with this comes again a reduction in latency of communication. So instead of me sending an email to you, Barrack, on a different ISPs, and it has to go through London, it gets exchanged here in Nairobi between our service providers at no cost at the exchange point. So this improves the quality of service and the end user's experience, and with that, then there's a lot more other content that can come in. We can now begin to depend on the networks for financial transactions. Then the financial transactions make sense, because with the central bank requiring them to be completed, a transaction to complete in 90 milliseconds, with us having 35 maximum with an issue 50 milliseconds, we are way better than even the threshold set by the Central Bank of Kenya. And we've seen in the last 1 year, a lot of financial institutions also come into the exchange point, because they know that their customers are using different ISPs, and there's freedom of choice in terms of who you want to use as service provider, and these are then they're able to make use of these and facilitate not just connectivity inclusion, but financial inclusion at the same time. And the other is making sure that we've got the right policy framework and regulatory environment. And it's on this basis that we realize we have to do a lot of work with the county governments. Our biggest gap right now is the challenge of county governments' inability to support infrastructure development in a lot of the underserved areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. And you've already touched a bit on my second question, and I think I will invite Bob to also respond to the same question. What combination of strategies, tools, and policies are being deployed by ICANN to address barriers to meaningful connectivity in underserved and marginalized areas?
Thank you, Barrack. So probably I have to highlight that ICANN operates, I would say, but we want to look at ICANN in two levels, the policy level and the operational level of ICANN. And probably I can just touch very briefly on both of those. But maybe I'll take a step back. And in a few years ago, ICANN worked with a consultant to work on a report that was titled Greasing the Wheels of the Digital Economy. This was done by the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. And they looked at this question in detail. And just to summarize, the key findings out of that report is, these barriers can be broadly categorized into 4 main areas. You have infrastructural barriers, as was already, has been highlighted here in the previous discussions. There are industry-specific barriers. Then there are individual-specific barriers. And then there are informational barriers. So the way they categorize these, in fact, so if you talk about barriers, it's not cross-cutting. So there'll be barriers that are very specific to industry that prevents businesses or organizations from accessing ICTs. There will be individual specific barriers. So something that affects me or prevents me from going online might not be the same thing that is affecting an organization, for example. I think infrastructure is universal, is understood. I mean, you either have it or you don't. But again, infrastructure is very broad. Fiona is talking about the exchange point. It's a piece of infrastructure. In the totality of the ICT infrastructure needs, there is a lot of different types of infrastructure, meaning a lot of different players. So if you were to detail that out, then you can actually pinpoint which of those specific pieces of infrastructure is probably a barrier most. And if I were to zero in on infrastructure from an ICANN perspective, you know that one of the responsibilities that we do have is on root servers as a core infrastructure of the internet. In fact, we only operate one of the root servers. So what are we doing to try and support, you know, the infrastructural needs that in totality combined with the other players, you know, those that do fiber, those that do radios, those that do cables, you combine all of them, you will still need CDNs, you'll still need IXPs, you'll still need root servers. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, ICANN installed what we are calling a cluster root server here in Nairobi. I wouldn't say where it was particularly installed, but it is part of the vision and a very intentional decision to bring this kind of infrastructure closer to users. And for you as an end user, just like what an IXP would achieve by bringing CDNs closer to you, this is what bringing a root server infrastructure closer to you helps you achieve, you know, a better user experience when you go online. So when you are accessing, you know, whatever content you are accessing, the speed at which you will receive it in Kenya, just because that piece of infrastructure is closer here, is different from, you know, someone that is in a different country that probably does not have, or that does not enjoy that kind of infrastructure. And again, as I said, this is really in the background, and sometimes you really don't realize that that has happened. So that is part of, you know, support that comes from ICANN in that line. But I also want to probably pivot a little bit on, you know, the internet critical identifiers themselves. Obviously, what we maybe know more about most of the time are IP addresses and domain names. And we know that we use, you know, these unique identifiers to navigate the internet. You need names to navigate the internet. You want to go to, you know, Safaricom, for example, you do safaricom.co.ke, then you access Safaricom's content. So that is a domain name. And when you do that, that resource, which is a domain name, is helping you navigate the internet. But at the same time, that particular resource has economic value, meaning that Safaricom has registered that domain name. And for them to register it, they pay for it. So that is an economic value. And if you think about anything.ke that you can think about today as a domain name, you use that name to navigate the internet, technical responsibility, but whoever has a domain name also pays for that domain name. So imagine if we had 100 domain names, and each domain name, you know, was say 1,000 shillings. And imagine if we had 1,000,000 domain names. So you can start looking at what could be the value of this particular resource. So I'm just trying to say that, you know, part of the barriers on usage is also denying the real economic value that this element of our digital economy could actually help introduce into our should I say, finance bill, for lack of a better word. But you can start to see that our contribution to the IGDP, or our digital economy, also starts to suffer as the barriers hinder industry, individuals, and the entire ecosystem from fully utilizing the potential of the economy. So each of these silent entities is a critical contributor, and they need to be addressed in the various categories. So there are infrastructure-specific barriers, there are industry-specific barriers, there are individual-specific barriers, there are informational-specific barriers, and I think in addressing them, we need to align to these different categories. Then holistically, I would believe that there will be a shift in numbers that Charles was talking about earlier.
Thank you very much. Adam?
Maybe I can ask a question of the audience. For those who are not looking at their phone, does anybody know what is the definition of affordable internet according to the ITU or the Alliance for Affordable Internet, A4AI? Anybody know what the definition of affordable internet is? No. Okay. So at least if I say one thing, I can educate people, and then you can forget everything else. And this is the current definition from the ITU and the A4AI is 2 gigabytes of data per month for less than 2% of average monthly income. Okay, so officially, I think Kenyan average monthly income is about 25,000 Kenya shillings per month. These are the statistics that apparently are out there. So, and so on. So, I guess others don't trust some statistics from the CA, for example, but okay. So, but I also want to emphasize, apart from looking at the 2% of 25,000, which would, the other important number I think is useful, I don't like averages. I think averages are not very useful because they really discriminate against people who are below average. And if you want internet to be affordable, it shouldn't be affordable for the average Kenyan. It should be affordable for all Kenyans. And so the other number I think is maybe relevant is the minimum wage, which apparently is around 15,000 Kenya shillings per month. Now, I'm not saying everyone earns that. Of course, many people are unemployed earn that, but at least maybe we could say 15,000 is a good benchmark. Ideally, every Kenyan should be earning 15,000 shillings per month. So 2% of 15,000 Kenya shillings per month is 300 Kenya shillings per month that you'd be spending on internet, 2% of 15,000. So there's not a lot of internet you can buy with 300 shillings per month. You could just about get 2 gigabytes if you're buying some very time-limited bundles, like an hour here or there, or a day here or there, but you really struggle, I think, for a whole month worth of package for 2 gigabytes for 300 shillings. If you buy for the whole month. But of course, if you have 1,000 Kenya shillings, you can get 10 or 15 gigabytes. The problem, of course, is it's much cheaper to buy per gigabyte if you buy 10 or 20 gigabytes than it is to buy in smaller amounts of money. But anyway, I think Kenya's not that far off for mobile bundles, so there's some progress. But anyway, so I wanted to come on. For me, I think the key issue for digital inclusion is the affordability. I don't think 2 gigabytes a month is enough. I don't think you can do much with 2 gigabytes per month. You can watch YouTube videos, probably if you're on a small device with a small screen, doesn't use much internet, probably for 2 hours per day for a month. The minute you start wanting to use a big screen TV or a tablet or a laptop, you'll have gone through 2 gigabytes in probably 2 or 3 days. On average, of course, many of us, we do it in a day or in a couple of hours. But I want us to think about this issue. How do we get more affordable internet? So the other thing I wanted to mention before I come to solutions is there's no definition in Kenya at the moment for affordable internet. So I think we need to have a definition. It can be an evolving definition. And I think there should be monitoring and as the CA has the quarterly reports about how many users are of the networks, the CA also requires telcos to register their prices with the CA. as like kind of a monitoring mechanism. So there could well be, I think relatively easily, a mechanism for reporting on pricing. Whether they decide 2 gigabytes or 10 gigabytes, or you want to do on speed or whatever it is, I think there should be a conversation about this, and there should be some kind of standard. Again, it could evolve year by year, and there could be a target for 5 years from now or whatever, and we can have that. Then I think we can look at where we are in the country as into affordability of internet, and then we can look at how do we make it more affordable. We talk a lot about obviously mobile internet, because the majority of Kenyans are connecting on mobile internet. Actually, you know, some people argue to be properly inclusive, you need to have unlimited internet, not by bundles, not by GB. Unlimited could be through mobile. You know, nowadays, especially with 5G, you can get an unlimited package on 5G, and you pay, again, for speed like you do with fixed networks or fiber services. I think both Airtel and Safaricom have those unlimited packages, sometimes 3K a month, sometimes 5K a month, depending on the speed you want for unlimited, which is good for mobile, nowhere close to 300 shillings per month, obviously. Or you look at fiber networks, or somewhere in the middle, we'll call it fixed wireless access, maybe using unlicensed Wi-Fi and community networks and other things like that, but to try to get unlimited. So I think we need to be aiming for affordable, unlimited internet. It doesn't have to be 1 gigabit per second, obviously. It could be lower speeds than that. So that's just kind of my comments where I think we need to go for digital inclusion. As an equipment infrastructure, of course, we're always trying to make the infrastructure cheaper, use less power, because power is probably the biggest cost of running a network, especially a mobile network, which uses a lot of power. And I think we're really trying to innovate in the fixed network space as well. I think the latest I heard was 350 now licensees or something the CA have that provide network services. I'm sure Fiona also has a number, but it's a huge number of people. There's been a massive explosion in the last 5 years, which is a really good thing. There's more competition, there's more network providers, whether they're community networks or whether they're bigger telcos. So we're also behind those, trying to provide cheaper equipment, including we call the ODN part, including the switches, including the routers, including many other things like that. But I also want to emphasize the issue of power, because power is a really big issue that causes a lot of the downtime. We heard earlier from Bob about when power is down, how severe it is. I think the 2 main causes of internet going down in Kenya will be fiber cuts and power outages. Power outages is a very, very big issue, and I think we have to look at addressing that. Of course, using solar and batteries can help in a way, but the benefit of fiber networks is fiber is mostly passive. You don't actually have to have power for the internet to be going down fiber. You have power at the very end to send the fiber down, send the internet down the fiber cable, and you need fiber at the opposite end to receive it and turn it into Wi-Fi normally. Though you could, of course, just use a cable to plug it into your laptop, and you wouldn't need power there either necessarily. So we're a big fan of trying to see how we can also make things more power efficient and lower cost. I also wanted to mention that because power and the cost of power is really one of the biggest drivers behind the cost of internet nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Okay, thank you, Barrack. I think after Fiona and Adam have spoken, what am I supposed to really add? Because they're the experts in the private sector with respect to finding solutions around how do we make internet affordable and available to everyone. But I think from a development partner point of view, what tools, strategies, and policies we promote, obviously it's working with multiple stakeholders, especially leveraging on their core competencies and areas of interest. So for example, private sector, like Adam, know the how to make these technologies work for everyone. And of course, Fiona is the one who is representing several and multiple private sector service providers, and those are key stakeholders for us. So we work a lot with all this, including now on the government side. There's a lot of work that we also need to support the government to be able to operationalize. I think we've spoken to several frameworks yeah, policy briefs as well as policy recommendations for what should really work. So for us, I think I would just say, strategically, we are better placed to also, be the voices of, through civil society organizations, be the voices of the voiceless. When it comes to affordability, I think Adam has tried to break down what it comes to. So 300 shillings a month, it's not sufficient, but still, even if that was the case, 300 shillings per day for 30 days, that's 9,000 shillings. I have about 3 or 4 young people in my house. Every day they ask me to give them, almost, a minimum of 100 shillings for their internet access, right? And I'm just an ordinary citizen. Can I afford that? And if I can, how many of our Kenyans can be able to afford 100 shillings per day for internet, versus the opportunity costs that then would come into play. So I think for me, I would just recommend that we engage multiple stakeholders and leveraging on each of our strengths. There's something that the development partners can do. There's a lot that the private sector can do, especially on devices, internet. That is squarely within the realm of the private sector partners as well as government. But then, as development partners, I think we are good in awareness creation, sensitization, capacity building, and the softer part of the use of that internet. Barrack, thanks.
Thank you very much, Charles. It's 3:05, and I know Fiona has to leave by 3:30, and we want to get as much from her as possible. So the next question, I will address it to TESPOK and Huawei. What policy barriers exist around spectrum allocation, universal service funds, infrastructure, and local content policies that hinder meeting affordability and inclusion targets in the digital economy? I think Charles has touched from our Njiku or Otieno perspective that he has to spend about 400 shillings per day. If we do times 30, and then assume that he's earning the 25,000 that Adam Lane said, then we can see there is a problem. There's a problem. I don't want to say what the term that people are saying out there, but let's have Fiona's take.
This is interesting. Now, I think from the conversation we are having, you've asked a very loaded question, and it's very difficult to be able to address the barriers that are affecting us in as far as the spectrum allocation, universal access, infrastructure, and local content are, because they are so many. But I'll try and pick just the top two, and then let Adam present the rest. Because you have to share the question, Adam. Now, I'll start with on spectrum allocation. I think the one biggest challenge we have in this country is that we do not have a register of how this spectrum is allocated. You don't know who's using what and where. Then we have got these interesting court cases that just pop up that someone's spectrum was snatched and given I don't know to, and you're wondering, how does a private sector spectrum end up being used by the military and things? So, as in, how is the allocation done? Because when it's well, according to the ITU guidelines, when it's well done, it's very clear. You'll know that certain frequencies are used by certain category of users. The intelligence guys and military use a different spectrum from what we use to serve the public. And so that should be clear. But because we don't know, tunajikuta tu, Adam, I'm sure you understand Kiswahili by now. Tunajikuta like sitting ducks, we're just there. Then it's taken and given to someone else, then customers are in darkness and they can't get services because spectrum has suddenly been switched in terms of use and changed hands. So our policies around how we manage spectrum internally need to be looked at. On the issue of universal service funds, that one is a thorn in our flesh. You know, ile unafikiria unajisaidia, kumbe umeenda ukakuwa nguruwe unajikaranga na mafuta yako tu. So basically, we've had a policy around the Universal Service Fund, but what we do not have is transparency and accountability for how the funds are being used. This kitty was supposed to be for licensed service providers to help licensees reach the underserved. Today, the kitty is being taken and being given to everybody who's not a licensee except the licensees. And the licensees are still supposed to be contributing. How can we be in a chama? We changa for the chama and then the money for chama is given to guys who are not members of the chama. It is only in Kenya where this is happening. It doesn't make sense. If we are contributing to a kitty for a particular purposes, then that money should help those who are contributing. If you're not contributing, then join the chama, contribute. We have no problem with you joining to contribute. But don't just sit back and then you're being given, we're just seeing our 32 billion has gone Kenya Power to do infrastructure. Then we are asking them what technology. For starters, from November last year, once service providers found out the technology Kenya Power wanted to use, they said it was old technology. It can't work in today's market. It locks service providers to one vendor. It locks out all the opportunities that they can have with vendors of their choice. So if say we had an arrangement with Huawei as my company, we can't use Huawei because the Kenya Power technology maybe has come with someone else and we now have to get that guy's equipment. It's not open. It's locking people up to serve certain interests. And it is our chama money that is being used to tie us up. Yani, munachangisha, munaibiwa, munapelekwa kotini, munapelekwa jela, munafungwa, munafreshiwa, munafanywa kila kitu. Na munaambiwa endeleeni na biashara. That tells you where the gap is and where the many barriers are. I think they have summarized all the ones on universal service. On local content, we have challenges of local content because we also do not have clear policies that guide and incentives for local content developers. So when we talk about local content is not just about the creatives. It goes over and above. It is also about content for education. It's about content that is used for agriculture. It's about content across all these economic sectors. And how we handle that data, apart from the data protection that looks at personal identifiable information, how the other data is getting handled is still not clear. So it's just an open space where a lot of entities can come in and do their thing, and then we sort of will hope that serendipitously a miracle will happen, and our startups that are handling content development will suddenly grow. The startups need access to data. They need access. They need to be supported so that there's proper policies and systems of how they can get data, even for research, to make decisions, to know which sectors they need to go into. Today we ask starters, what do you want to do? People just think of things they are passionate about. Sometimes what you're passionate about, actually, getting that data will be harder than starting another business. You're better off changing your business model and moving into another area, because you find we still have a culture where certain information that should be in the public domain is considered government information for your eyes only, sijui secrets. Technology flattens all those things. It opens up the space so that there is more accountability. And if managing local content means that there has to be more responsibility on us who hold leadership positions, so be it. And we need to bite the bullet and, step up. Step up and do the right thing. But trying to it's like in far as local content is concerned, we are still thinking old school and thinking that we can move with the new technology. My friend, you are not going to take that's an engine and put in a Lamborghini. I don't know if that can work, but I know my common sense tells me it cannot work. Who last saw a Datsun? Who knows even what a Datsun is?
There used to be, when I was in nursery school, there used to be in the Safari Rally a guy called Shakameta, and he used to drive a Datsun, I think Datsun. I remember that. So you'd hear the car revving in the radio, Shakameta, Datsun, I don't know, Datsun. I don't know what a Datsun looks like, but but I know there was a car called a Datsun. Today when I look for a Datsun, I can't find a Datsun, but I know what a Lamborghini looks like. Now imagine that car at your Datsun engine in a Lamborghini. Hapo umetupa mbao. So we need to do something about our level of leaders and build capacity so that they are able to realize that they need to re-engineer themselves, and they need to go back to school, and they need to retrain and change their mindset so that they can be able to engage with the current tech space, to have the right content development policies, local content supporting policy framework. It's not just about having cloud. Yes, we have a cloud, but what are we putting in the cloud? Eh? We have to have the content to put in that cloud. Huwezi kuwa na sufuria na moto na unaona kitu unapika huko ndani. Chemsha basi maji, ukae na hiyo maji yako. Na maji sio chakula, utashiba. And doesn't make sense for you to be boiling water to drink a whole pot of water. You might as well just drink it from the tap, you know. So we need to have a change of mindset at the leadership level to be able to have any meaningful way forward in as far as local content is concerned. And then on the final issue is infrastructure. Infrastructure has many facets, and the one biggest facet of infrastructure that everyone does not pay attention to, that is assumed it is there, is our telco fiber infrastructure. Yet it's the most vandalized. It is getting vandalized at such a high rate that if we don't stop the vandalization, we cannot bring down the cost of internet connectivity. We now need to have communities owning the infrastructure around where they live, where they work, where they do their businesses. Because if you have people cutting that infrastructure today, fiber cable is cut, an ATM will not work, your internet will be down, a hospital needing to do record sharing with the main HQ cannot do it. You will go to a satellite clinic, you can't be served. For the Aga Khans and Mata hospitals, those Jubilee clinics, Equity Afia, those who go through there, you understand what that means. It means that we are then even not ready to fully scale up to more complicated online services. When the learning system goes down, e-learning was a good idea. Those devices in the school were a good idea. Lakini zinaletwa kwa container, hakuna stima, hakuna connectivity, zina connect na mate. Watoto wateme mate wa connect device. Seriously, basically, we need to think critically about how we do infrastructure deployment so that it is meaningful. We've got cases that have done well, but the majority of the general public are not doing well at all. We need to up our game in terms of how we do the infrastructure rollout. With the definition that Adam is giving for connectivity, how many schools, for example, basic primary schools have that connectivity when you think about it? So when you look at it, you realize there are a lot of things we also have on paper, but we are not implementing because we are not putting our money where our mouths are. Tunaweka midomo huku, tunapiga yap yap, na pesa zinaenda kwenye zinaenda. And that is what are some of the challenges. I'll hand over to Adam for the rest.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Adam?
Okay, maybe I can do the part 2 of Fiona without all the Swahili and without all the lively stories. But we worked together along with many others on a big success last year that Kenya is, I think, the 2nd or 3rd country in Africa that requires all new buildings to be fiber ready. The new building code was published last May and has become implemented this May because there was a 12-month period before it became legally required. I think it's the 2nd or 3rd country in Africa, at least sub-Saharan Africa. It's a really big deal. It means every property, whether it's your single dwelling farm in the countryside, or a multi-dwelling unit in a big city, or a government or a school, should have entrances into properties, like through a manhole, for example. It should have ducts within the property, especially if it's a multi-story property, to get internet cables up and down floors, and from the floor into each apartment or each unit. That's a good thing. It will really save a lot of time and hassle and money, and also enhance competition for smaller providers to be able to more quickly and affordably connect people to internet. So that's a success. Are we allowed to talk about successes? I don't know if that's allowed, but so that's congratulations, maybe to ourselves, to me and Fiona, and a few others, not only us, many of the big and other telcos and others here were part of that team that did that. On the spectrum, I don't know if I can correct Fiona or otherwise, there's a very good spectrum policy. The question is the implementation of it, and yes, the transparency around the implementation of it. But the policy, I think written by Engineer Obam about 4 years ago that was published, is a very good policy. And there's actually a huge amount of spectrum available and becoming available in Kenya in the next 2 years, thanks to the ITU decision of WRC 23. The question is the pricing of that spectrum. But there's a lot of unlicensed spectrum available, which is good for certain purposes, and a lot of licensed spectrum becoming available. But yes, there's a big question about how is that priced. The CA did a study, I think it's on their website, about annual fees for using spectrum, but they didn't do a study about the upfront cost for getting spectrum, because that number is, I don't know, a special number that is coming from other means. So that's, I think, just a reference to Fiona's comments about spectrum. The other three things I wanted to mention, there was several guidelines and regulations that were worked on as part of the update to KICA, the Kenya ICT Act. Fiona was one of the members of that team. Those have disappeared. Have water been spilt on those documents? I'm not sure what happened to those documents, but I believe they've not been published. But one of the key topics they were to discuss was infrastructure sharing. And I think we saw a really interesting example of this, was it 2 months ago? In Nairobi County, where the fight between Kenya Power and Nairobi County led to people's fiber being taken down or unusable. That shouldn't be happening. You know, there should be a process, there should be a procedure, there should be policies that guide these things. If there's disputes, how do they get resolved? There shouldn't be people have no fiber. In fact, it was entire parts of Nairobi County went dark for a while. So this is a major issue. We have to resolve the infrastructure sharing issue. That's just fighting between county governments, between parastatals, between those who have paid way leaves, who have not paid way leaves, who should be paying way leaves, or who shouldn't be paying way leaves. There's a real lack of clarity around that. Now, very interestingly, for those who've been paying attention, the new ICT Authority bill, I don't think it's an act yet, proposes the ICT Authority will be in charge of all way leaves for internet for the entire country, which would assumably mean county governments would not, which would be very interesting, and we'll have to see how that proceeds. Yeah. So anyway, but that's something I think everyone can look out for. It could be a very good thing to have more standardization and have maybe policy makers, hopefully, who focus on internet connectivity rather than focus on revenue. But there's a real challenge, and we need to have some discussion as a country, I guess, to work out this fight between revenue versus internet. And that infrastructure sharing is a key issue. The other brief thing I was going to mention was around implementing existing laws. So there's the Critical Infrastructure Act. Was it passed yet? Not yet. Still another law that's in progress. But either way, once it's passed, and there's already existing laws anyway, the key is implementing again. If you cut fiber, even now I think it's illegal, and you can be punished and you can be fined, though a very small amount. But people are not being punished, people are not being fined generally. Maybe a few small guys here and there that steal fiber or still sometimes do get punished, but not enough. So if we don't enforce the policies, that's also the big challenge. So I know, I'm sure Fiona's itching for something before she leaves for her flight.
No, I just want to say on the policy, on the terms of acts, we have had a review of all the acts that touch on infrastructure, and there are about 7 different laws that touch on infrastructure, ICT or telecommunications infrastructure. Unfortunately, because our police officers do not understand those new laws, there's been no training for them. Once you finish the Kiganjo training, there is no requirement for you to keep training. And because there is no requirement, when there's a new law, there is no way of them knowing that there is now a new law so that they adapt. So we've got a lot of good laws that have been written, but they cannot be implemented at the police level because the police officers have no knowledge and capacity to engage. So what TESPOK did is we put together a document identifying those laws section by section, which clause, what it means, and what the penalty is, and what should be done. And so some of them even include economic sabotage when you do some of the infrastructure, like what the county government did on Kenya Power. That was economic sabotage. And so when you look at it that way, then that means that there should be no bail. It is, you stay in jail until your case is complete and things like that. And so as a result of not knowing, we find that there is no police station you will go to and get assistance for that kind of a crime. And we are having vandals being handled like petty criminals, damage of property, cash bail, 5,000 bob, and the guy goes to work, and tomorrow night again he's on the same route, cutting another, stealing a part, doing something, he's caught again. So it's 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, and at the end of the day, he's making money by using that infrastructure for whatever it is he's using for, which is way more than the 5,000 he's paying. So it looks like it's a sharing arrangement between the thugs and the police.
Thank you, Fiona. You are injecting. All right. Let me just change a bit so that we don't miss your final comments. I will move the next question to Bob and Charles, and I'll start with Charles. Then we'll have Bob conclude. What has been learned from digital inclusion initiatives to create affordable, scalable local models for access, infrastructure expansion, digital literacy, and innovation to accelerate internet usage and respond to the needs of the 52% that are still offline in the country?
Thank you, Barrack. Another loaded question, right? Looks like Barrack this time around decided that all his questions have to be PhD questions. So we'll attempt. Yeah, so I think the point here is around the 52% of those that are still not accessing internet. And what have we learned? I think what we think we can share is that there's a role for everyone. And each of the stakeholders has a strategic strength. So I would say the lesson for me would be private sector, as I said, they are good in innovating and finding us sustainable solutions to give us last mile connectivity. I believe that government also has a big responsibility to provide public good, as well as to create an enabling environment that also includes some of the policies, regulations that my panelists are speaking to. But I think there's also this role for civil society organizations that are also equally having a big role that they can help address some of the issues that my panelists are speaking to. Lack of awareness, creation, sensitization, capacity building of the stakeholders to be able to partake the services that are available. So I think for me, the lesson is that, and I think the situation is going to be a bit more difficult for civil society organizations now that donor funding is really, out of the door. Private sector companies, the likes of Huawei and Fiona, if they can avail funding to civil society organizations to help us with capacity building, awareness creation, and sensitization of community members where they stay and live, would be a game changer and would actually help in a big way to address the usage gap, which of course these people are just living under the available services, but they're not using. So if we can start channeling funding to community-based organizations, community networks, not-for-profit organizations, and that funding coming from the private sector, because they have a budget within the foundations or within the corporate social responsibility arm. That way, I think the civil society organizations have mechanisms through which they can actually be able to, bring their people onto usage. That would be the lesson that I would like to share here. Barrack, thanks.
Thank you very much, Charles. Bob?
Barrack, I thought that question was only for, I didn't know it was finding its way to me. Maybe just to add, I think on the investment perspective, I always feel that, I don't know whether it's a way of being conditioned, but whenever we talk about investors, it's like the first thing that comes to your mind or you imagine is that it has to be foreign. And I think to his point on, foreign aid or support is greatly diminished at the moment. But probably that is also, if we want to imagine that that could only be the source of investment, do we think we can have local investors? And do we treat local investors the way we treat foreign investors? It's like tourism, where for a long time we only imagine that tourists can only be those that have come from beyond our borders. And the moment, that was changed, a tourist is a tourist, regardless of where you come from, and try and start treating them, including policy-wise, the same, so that a local investor is as good as a foreign investor. Then I guess we could actually unlock some of these internal resources that today are not really maybe treated equally or do not have the same environment to invest and probably get returns in the investment as compared to foreign investment. But maybe, again, very quickly, from an ICANN perspective, I would imagine that one of the contributions is really joining other partners. As you see, I think the gaps are pretty wide, and you wouldn't imagine one particular entity, for example, or investor, able to address everything. And I think this calls for partnerships, a multi-stakeholder engagement and involvement across different partners. Obviously, organizations have, very specific mandates and visions, and each of them is trying to achieve something specific. But I guess there are areas of convergence in terms of, greater good, community good, that if we work together, then we, are able to come to a common point on things that we can jointly intervene on, for the benefit of not only our, respective consumers or users of our services, but also the greater good of the community and government as well. So there is room for greater partnerships, including local, international investors and partners as well. And even when international partners are, curtailed, I think we should, realize that we can actually have local investors and partners if we treat them right and give them the right environment.
Thank you very much, Bob. I'm just going to give the floor an opportunity to raise 4 questions in the interest of time. And then we'll come back with the last question to all the panelists. I will ask, it's a simple question. What is the one key intervention that should be prioritized to stimulate meaningful access and ensure implementation of sustainable and community-driven digital inclusion models that deliver positive socioeconomic outcomes? It's a loaded question, but the panel can be mulling over that, even as I come to the audience to see whether there is any question. Yes, I see David's hand. Anyone else? You will introduce yourself. That's the second one. Anyone else? David, kindly, we have Jacob over here. Last, we have Engineer Mulongo. All right. I'll give you my mic, so keep time.
My question is about affordability. How does the rural masses access internet in an affordable way? The government has a duty to ensure that there is access. What are you recommending that the government can do to ensure cheap internet in the rural places, in the masses? Because this economy has to grow when we have affordable internet in the villages. Thank you.
I want to appreciate the panelists for the exciting discussion. My case can perhaps be answered by Adam and Fiona because it's directed to the private sector. We all know that in terms of affordability, there are many factors that contribute to affordability, but I'd like you to focus on the factors that are within the control of the private sector. Let's say the factors that Huawei can control on their side, or maybe on the side of TESPOK, the members like the operators and the like. Because when we look at how we build up the cost of internet, of course we look at the supply side as well, and that's where you come. So what do you think can be done, or what have you done from your side to try and tilt the scale towards what you think the ordinary Kenyan, especially in the marginalized areas, can afford? Thank you.
Yep, my name is Patrick. Actually, mine is not a question, but mainly to just make a comment based on what has been presented there. I think one of it is, which something you need to appreciate for Kenya, is that where we are in terms of the network extension, network expansion in Kenya, it is largely contributed by the chaos that we have in the industry. And I call it necessary chaos. The necessary chaos in this case, that right now, if you look at the total number of, I think, from ICANN and Afrinic, we have about 197 registered ISPs, or basically firms that have AS numbers, which basically meaning that they, like ISPs, can be ISPs, but part of them are banks and other smaller entities. If you look at the ones that have registered, and I think Fiona may be aware of this, the ones that have registered with Afrinic for the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, they are names that they were not existed 5, 6 years ago. And these people are the ones that have been doing the necessary chaos in the estates. They have been buying internet from one operator and then distributing it. Even CAK or CA may not have been even on the radar of CA, but they were distributing internet. But then as they have grown, this necessary chaos, the one I'm calling necessary chaos, what has happened is it has either motivated in terms of the expansion of network access. So for me, I think as an industry, as an economy, we should not curtail this necessary chaos. We should actually be playing more of a catch-up, trying to be able to either reach where they are, or at least be able to support them in terms of actually becoming mainstream. And I think one of it is the programs that are supposed to be either through the the private sector, the civil society, to be able to help these chaos become entrenched into the official economy. So that's first part for me. Then number two, on what I've realized is, and I think when you talk about the part of information dissemination, I tend to feel that there's very little that is known, either positively happening within the economy or not. Well, my experience in the industry, what I've noted is that like these laws that you're talking about, they're existing and they have never, the laws that are existing and they are not known by the police on how to actually have them implemented. when members have come together is when they come and make sure that they are known. Another part is about, like, for example, the device connectivity. I remember, just to go back into this, the president, in terms of one of the things that was announced, I think by the government, the current government, was they will make the device affordability for the purpose of, the smartphone affordability for a device that is below 5,000. And I saw that yesterday or this week on being discussed on the media, and people said this was a lie. And I told them, maybe you do not know. There's actually device assembly through M-Copper and Safaricom that is less than 5,000 shillings. But the part what it is not 5,000, it's basically 5,000 to access it, but then you pay a specific amount of a period of time. So I think it is necessary for us to be able to see, for us to be able to grow, it's necessary to see that this information, like the appearances like this one that say it is illegal, it is a criminal to vandalize infrastructure, this is the place that is paying, let become the enhancers of actually making sure that the information is available and disseminated in the right way and in timely manner. Such forums are good for the purpose of exchange of information. We learn from each other. We learn with what is happening in the industry, and basically all this works towards the growth of our economy. Thank you.
Was there any other person? Was there any other person? Or I finish? Okay. My question is, besides the cuts and vandalism, how is the sector addressing the issue around counterfeits within the same infrastructure discussion?
To you, and also give your concluding remarks based on the question I asked.
I'm going to try and be brief because I have to run, but I'm glad I waited until the end for the questions. We've been driving, TESPOK members are part of what the second last question, what you asked about the Afrinic and Essence and all that. Now, all this on infrastructure, but that is not where the chaos are happening. There is another category of players in the space who are creating the chaos. The newer guys who are able to go and get an SN, and they are also able to get a license from CA, and a lot of the times they come to TESPOK, we help them, we walk with them the journey, we help them get the ASN numbers from Afrinic. We have a category of individuals who do not want to be licensed, because even when CA reduced the license to 2,000 shillings a year, they refuse to register. So they don't want to be licensed. They are serving the public. They serve internet connectivity at a rate of between 1,000 to 3,000 shillings, depending on the estate or the building or whatever arrangements they have, being resellers of the big players, but wanting to be an ISP in their own right at the same time. It's about wanting to bake your pie and eat it at the same time. And that is where we are having an issue. The issue is not that the ones who come forward and formalize, it's very easy. We give them the support, we walk with them the journey, they get their resources, they're able to connect, and we even help them get into the exchange to get Google, Meta, traffic, TikTok, everything, and push it down to their customers at ease. Now, the individual who doesn't want to register, first of all, they don't even have a county license. They're operating from their houses, the sitting room or the bedroom. They are collecting almost 4 million shillings every month when you look at their customer base, who they serve, and the rate at which they charge. They don't want to pay any taxes. They don't want to be responsible for anything but their own pockets. Not with an economy like what we have right now in this country. You have to be able to be responsible and accountable to some extent. We've been doing since last week trainings with the regulator, inviting them for training sessions so that we can be able to help them understand why all these processes are important, hoping that they can formalize. But now we are going to start another engagement where we shall be telling customers, landlords, property owners, if the person doesn't have a CA license, don't allow them in. Period, as simple as that. So that then they make a decision. You have to be paying peana ya siza mahali. Wacha chukua kila kitu hivyo. Why? Because 2,000 out of 4.5 million, there's a guy who's making 4.5 million in Githurai a month. he does not do anything KRA. He has, as in, all of it nakujanga M-Pesa and it's withdrawn at the end of the day. Yeah? There is no way of tracking, we can't live like that and say that we are holding ourselves as Kenyans accountable. When it comes to infrastructure, in terms of reducing the prices and making things affordable, our biggest challenge, when a service provider, in one place, you have got those small guys, many of them cutting your cable because they don't know where to order, then they go to where you've put your Kenya Power, your posts, and they remove the cable from there like 60 meters, 5 meters, 6 meters. Who cuts cable like that? Unless you're going to deploy it somewhere else. Then they go and they deploy to their customers because they know they have the technical skill. Then they now are, at the end of the day, those many cuts on fiber cable become very expensive because after a certain number of cuts, depending on the distance, you can't put it together anymore. You have to remove the entire cable and put a new one. That is a very expensive process. As long as we have to budget for that cost as part of our maintenance costs, we would like this connectivity to come down. We would like it to bring it down. But how are we supposed to even break even? We're not talking about profits, just breaking even. And in that cost, we have not even added the cost. The problem with the infrastructure space is there are too many unpredictable costs. The things we can predict and have control over is when I have planned my budget and I know what my investment in is going to be and what to expect, that we can work on. But you find that also gets interfered with insofar as the number of cuts keep increasing, because at one point it was stable, we never used to have cuts, it was easy. At that time we thought the cost was going to come down, our only issue was the government way lives and access. Today, county government wakes up and changes their 200 shillings per kilometer rate for laying fiber to 200 shillings per meter overnight. What does that mean? It means that the cost that I budgeted for 100 kilometers in a county is no longer the same cost. My budget has just been messed up totally. Then add to that contractors, you've laid your fiber. You have just spent on a crazy budget and the contractor comes and pulls it out and says, no, it is not a utility. Niambie, utility law. Wapi imeandikwa ini utility? It is not a utility, so there's nothing we are paying for it. Find somewhere else to put your fiber. How do we plan? It is impossible from the service provider's end to plan properly. We have a desire of giving that unlimited that Adam is talking about, would like to offer it. But I can tell you for free, even those who are able to offer the MNOs, who are able to offer that unlimited, you find there are places where it is just totally challenged, that haionekani. Iko unlimited, but if you find it, if you try, you'll find generally it is not available. But the offer is there. And so we need to be able to we need to sit down and rethink of how we manage our infrastructure, because the management of it is having a significant impact on the cost of affordability, but as service providers, we have a desire to bring that cost down. Help us.
Thank you, Fiona.
With that, I have to run.
Yes, I can see the MC has waved several times. We are out of extra time. So if we could just have concluding remarks,
yes,
as well as your take.
The MC is actually waving red. But I think Fiona has essentially just said that if we want this to be affordable, it is actually in your hands as well. The totality of the cost of running infrastructure includes the many times that it is cut and it has to be reconnected. And ultimately, the end user has to pay for this. So, you know, we all have a responsibility to make this affordable. And I think the other item here is that affordability is also probably a factor of definition. So, you know, people would argue what is affordable. And I think we probably at the moment are lacking a national benchmark on this is what we mean when we say it is affordable. So anything higher than this or lower than this is either expensive or affordable. And at the same time, affordability is gained over time. So, you know, you use CapEx to deploy infrastructure. you take time to get your return on investment, and then gradually that service becomes affordable. So it's also a question of time as we go along. I guess there is literally no more time to say any other thing.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, Adam?
Okay, I'll try in a speed way to answer some of those questions. First, you asked about what's being done to reduce the cost of affordability. So the two biggest costs of a mobile site is the tower and the power over the 10, 20 years of powering that site. So the two biggest things that can be done to reduce the cost is smaller towers of different design, cheaper design. So we've also been helping innovate in these. We now have some sites that we build for customers with poles, not towers, like 10 meters, 15 meters. The coverage won't cover as big distance, but it's good enough for small rural sites. And then really big focus on batteries and solar power for very, very low, long cost of power over the life of a 10-year site, whatever. The other cost that I'll mention briefly, because we've not talked about it almost ever, is to get the internet to a mobile tower, you can use what we call point-to-point microwave rather than fiber. There's really those, okay, it's three options. You could use satellite, you can use fiber, or you use point-to-point microwave, like you point the internet from one site to another site. It can go up to 50 kilometers if you can see the other tower. That spectrum cost is huge. You also have to pay a spectrum fee to use the spectrum when you're doing that point-to-point backhaul, we call it, to a rural site. And that's a major barrier at the moment that we're a bit unhappy about. Then the other thing that is important is about how to install equipment quicker and at lower cost. Installation cost is a huge issue, especially fiber to the home. So we really focus on making fiber, don't have to splice it, you can just plug and play. You have these adapters and things like this to make it simpler, easier, and quicker. You have much less cabling in buildings. We have a whole different system around that that's lower cost, even cheaper plastics, cheaper things to reduce the cost of all this equipment. Linked to that is the issue about, someone mentioned about devices. I'm always a bit of a skeptic about very, very low cost devices. I don't think they'll ever go very, very low cost. If they do, you're suffering or sacrificing quality of batteries, quality of screens, waterproof protection, and then you just ends up with broken phones, maintaining phones, and more e-waste. So I'm not against very affordable devices. Huawei doesn't make very cheap phones. Others do, and I'm really, really happy. More people with phones and more can use internet, and we sell more internet equipment. But we have to be very conscious about the issues of getting very, very cheap and suffering on quality, which is not a long-term solution. Tax is a huge issue. You mentioned about the 5,000 shillings. I think the new finance bill is going to remove the tax exemptions of importing components that will be used for local assembly of phones. Doesn't sound like a great idea from digital inclusion perspective. It sounds like they're just removing tax exemptions across the board for everything. So that may cause phones to increase, especially the ones produced by M-Copper or the EDAC, the one with Safaricom and JTL. I believe, I'm not a tax expert. I know the bill is only a bill and not an act yet either. Also, very quickly, I wanted to mention about the DigiTruck, just in reference to what Charles mentioned. I know the Kick the Net and DAP did some amazing work on rural digital skills training and awareness raising. We've also been doing something similar. We have a truck that goes to rural areas training youth on digital skills. We have done about 6,000 people so far. We also need to do more, and we hope to continue expanding. We're also working with Mama Doing Good to provide digital skills training to women micro-entrepreneurs who are using table banking or maybe chamas, as Fiona talked about it, to borrow money for their businesses and also give them digital skills to help with their businesses as well. So we want to do more, working with more community organizations too. That's a speed question. Thank you.
Thank you
maybe the
very
last thing, sorry, you answered the question. You asked the question. The one thing government could do, though it would be a very controversial move, is bulk buy data to access certain services, or require telcos to give certain access to websites for free. During COVID-19, accessing education websites was free on Safaricom and Airtel, and maybe others as well. Not anymore. That could be mandated or could be encouraged voluntarily. The same could be done, not all websites, I'm saying education websites like KICD, e-Citizen, those things could be either paid for by government. If they bought terabytes worth of data, it would be way cheaper than everyone buying and accessing the website on their own, or they could mandate, like under COVID-19, for certain websites to be free as well. That would be really transformative, and it would be something worth discussing more. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Charles,
Well, coming last, I can only say I support all the recommendations that have been made by the panelists as well as the audience. But specifically, I think I would be happy to have Kictanet. You know, I've been enticing Kictanet to look the other side, like, you know, providing now tangible on the ground, you know, interventions, because they've done a lot of work looking up in terms of, you know, influencing policy, think tanking, and all that. So I think I would encourage, my parting shot would be to encourage Kictanet and all of us to, you know, do follow-ups of these conversations and practically bring, you know, the private sector, civil society, academia, all of us into now finding practical solutions to some of the conversations we're having. And we can actually do it practically by saying, so Huawei, TESPOK, and other private sector partners come to the room, we bring on board the civil society organizations, and then we ask ourselves, who can deliver this better for the entire ecosystem? Because I know, interacting with the private sector, people as well have realized that our wiring is totally different. You know, as not-for-profit organizations, we totally think different from private sector, you know, profit, you know, oriented partners. But if you come together, we can actually agree on a table that indeed you guys can actually get us impact for this. So run with it as we ask them to also focus on, you know, getting us the best devices and all that can help us reduce the cost of affordability. That could be my recommendation, and I hope we won't wait for the next KIGF to have this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Charles. Indeed, our work is cut. Before we say must go, we have to read documents. That's what I've learned yesterday and today. The devil is in the details, as you have heard from the panelists and the rich interventions that they have made. With that, I request you, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause to this panel.
Our learners only can learn well by doing and by seeing. And being in a rural school, that is a village school, we do not have many things, as in we get our knowledge only in books. You teach something, they haven't seen it, they have never seen it, so it is abstract in their minds. And so I was able to show them some videos, and it has been good. It is creating interest in the learners. Whenever we get any strange material from the books, we are given a link there in that book. So we are now opening those links, and in every teaching subject now, I mean every teaching subject, including even mathematics. So we are integrating ICT in every learning area in the school. If these learners were left alone, it means that they would not be competent enough to go to the world and to compete with the other learners who are accessing ICT. So now, as a teacher, I'm so happy because now, when these learners are accessing the devices as early as grade 1, that is 7 years, 6 years, it means that when they are exiting school, they will be as competent